diagnosed with a terminal illness and were only given a short amount of time left to live, what would you do? Would you accept treatment and care, like palliative care, which doesn't necessarily aim to try to cure you of your illness, but just makes the symptom and pain more manageable? Or would you want to be aware of other options, such as MAID, or medical aid in dying, which is when a healthcare provider can prescribe a lethal drug for a terminally ill patient to administer when they choose to. Although this can sound like a jarring question of choosing death over life, it is something that some terminally ill patients are having to face and to choose. For example, in the Moon Post on April 28 of 2025, James McComa, a Minnesotan father, was diagnosed with stage 4 intestinal cancer and was only given 12 months to live. McComa says how he wishes he had access to MAID so that he could choose when to end his life instead of letting the cancer just take him and have it be a drawn out and painful death for him. Although in this speech, I am going to be arguing that although MAID should be an option available for terminally ill patients to choose, it should be made accessible and approached with caution so as to avoid the misuse of it or abuse of power and vulnerability in these patients. I will do this by addressing the main problem faced in this situation, as well as some underlying causes for it, and proposing some solutions for it. The concept of someone wanting to choose MAID might be a bit jarring, but what I found most shocking while researching this was the fact that not only can someone choose this, but the option can almost be made for them, with some relatives pushing this option onto their ill relatives. In the Observer on April 7th of 2021, it says they share how some family relatives can try and persuade their terminally ill family members into choosing MAID as an alternative. Likewise, in the Chicago Tribune on October 11th of 2025, they share concerns as to the weakened state that their illness might bring on patients and leave them more susceptible to this coercion and this outside influence. Now, this problem isn't an isolated entity. There is something causing these relatives to feel the need to push this option onto their relatives. And this is what's going to be my second point in this speech, which is the inaccessibility of healthcare. Although I've mentioned that palliative care can be an option, it is not universally accessible. In Baltimore Sun on March 4th of 2025, a cancer patient was denied access to her chemotherapy drugs, with her healthcare provider citing its high cost and its ineffectiveness. She was instead suggested to try MAID as an alternative. And although MAID should be an option that is available, it should not be the first one that is given to them. Like this patient in the Herald on February 19 of 2025, a Canadian patient with a neurodegenerative disease that has left him reliant on the care of others was also denied access to the home attendant care that he wants, and was instead pushed by relatives, friends, and healthcare providers to choose MAID as the alternative when he says it is not an option that he wants. Although I am in favor of providing access to MAID, it should not be forced onto them, or patients should not feel like they need to choose it. And this is another thing of this problem with the lack of accessibility to healthcare, where they feel like MAID is an option that they need to choose out of duty to spare their relatives the pain and the financial burden that taking care of them can provide, impacting not only the patient but the family. Now, what can we do to try and help ease these concerns with access to MAID? Well, on the individual level, we could have these conversations, not only with our relatives, but also with our healthcare providers. It is a healthcare provider's responsibility to make sure that their patients are aware of all the options they have, as not telling them what options are available to them can negatively impact their autonomy, as said in The Star on September 27th of 2025. And another set of concerns that are addressed in the Sunday Telegraph on January 21st of 2024 is the increase in demand if one's MAID becomes more accessible, with demand in making it more accessible not just to patients who are terminally ill, but perhaps to patients whose illnesses aren't necessarily detrimental to their life. To combat this, they suggest maybe adding safeguards in, and we can urge policy and lawmakers to add in these safeguards to provide an extra layer of protection. There could be residency requirements. The approval could be by multiple doctors could be a requirement as well in order to give MAID to a patient, as well as MAID only being available to mentally sane adults whose illnesses bring unbearable pain and who only have a limited amount of time left to live. MAID and the concept of MAID is something that is very complex and difficult to talk about, but it is important to have these conversations so that we know how to address them, or if we ever have to experience something like a terminal illness, we know what options to take, and we know to take them, and we know which ones we should take out of our own free will and not because we feel influenced or pressured by outside forces. In this speech, I argued how MAID should be accessible, but it should be proceeded with caution so as to avoid the misuse and of power, as well as the abuse and taking advantage of weakened terminally ill patients who may not be 100% on board taking MAID. I did this by showing how the lack of accessibility to healthcare can maybe influence relatives to push their terminally ill patients into taking MAID to kind of ease the burden of palliative care that can bring on them. I shared how we could urge lawmakers to add in safeguards, as well as have these conversations on a smaller scale to be prepared in case we ever need to have these conversations. Death is something that we are not immune to, and we need to know how to be prepared to tackle something like this. Thank you.